Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Your co-host Rich Gear here as well, and well, Doug, I'm kind of interested in this subject. We've actually talked about the subject in various ways before about creatures that can't evolve, and you recently went on a trip down with Central America or South America?
Yeah, it was Central America, and
it
was on a cruise liner, MS Zeeterdam, I guess is the name of it, and it's with Holland America, and it was a trip that took us through Half Moon Cay in the Bahamas. It went to Aruba and Curacao, and went into the Panama Canal halfway into Gatun Lake, which is the big lake, man-made lake in the middle of Panama. And then it came back out the same way it went in. Then we stopped at Costa Rica and toured the Tortuguero canals and the Veragua rainforest.
Now, the animals we're going to talk about, some of them are most of them are pretty well known, but they're very interesting. But the reason why this subject is the stuff you actually got to see, these are animals that I think evolutionists have a very difficult time explaining.
Oh yeah, and it isn't hard to find animals like that.
It really is not. They're all over the place. You know, their gross morphological features are how do they? It's like giving somebody a direction how to get someplace. The guy tries to tell you this and that, and then he finally says, well, you can't get there from here.
Yeah.
That's really where evolution comes from, I think, a lot of times with some of these animals. So
the title of this show is Creature Features.
Creature Features.
And so we're going to just to discuss a few of the things that we encountered on this trip. And the first thing that we ended up in was in Half Moon Cay. They had a lagoon, and it was sort of like a moon-shaped type of beach that is on one end. But on the other, you can walk over to the other side of the island, where there's a lagoon where it's sort of like a lake in the middle of the island. It's sort of like an atoll where it's built up of coral reef. And so
were they alive? Was it a living coral reef, or was it?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, those are fun.
And so in this particular case, they had a area that was cordoned off where they had stingrays, and the stingrays were actually tamed to the point where you could actually hold them.
Stingrays always sort of freak me out because they can sting you, and of course, a few years back that crocodile hunter Steve Irwin got killed he was in a boat and a stingray pops out and stabs him in the chest, and they say he probably could have lived, but he pulled the stinger out, and that was a big mistake. It broke off inside him and ended up killing him because they are poisonous. But you say these are fairly docile. In fact, they are docile sort of normally, aren't they? But these are even more tame,
of course. I'm right now showing this on in the edited in the video where you're seeing there's a young lady in a wetsuit who's actually holding the stingray in her hands, and she's picking up the tail and showing the stinger.
Wow. Okay.
And so there's all these different people standing around waiting to have a chance to encounter the stingrays, and the stingrays are just sort of loving on them because they're going all around them so that they are because they know they're going to get fed. And so they're pretty docile, but the thing that you have to do is make sure that if you're walking around, that you sort of walk with a shuffle so that you don't step on one. You don't want to. That's where you run into a problem if you step on one.
I remember this wasn't a stingray when I was down in the Caribbean, down there, St. Thomas Island. I wore these little shoes because they had these little corals with spikes on them, and one guy
urchins,
and I can't remember what they were called now. Anemones, some kind of an anemone.
Anemones, yeah.
Yeah, and they were an enemy of your feet, I'll tell you that. But the thing is, they would break off, and this one guy, he was in misery, stepped on one of these things, and they must have been 2-3 hours trying to pull the spikes out of him and digging it out.
Well, that's a sea urchin, I think.
Maybe it's an urchin, whatever it was, but it was bad. But the stingray.
Here's a few things about the stingray that are interesting. Okay. The barbed stingers are used for self-defense, and they can reach a length of 14 inches.
The stinger itself?
The stinger
So
itself.
not the tail, the stinger.
The stinger, right.
Wow, okay.
And of course, these...
Because they're not that big, sorry about that.
yeah, they're about this big around,
So
but
maybe
you
2,
can have
3
the big manta rays that are
They're
really
huge.
huge.
Now,
Like,
they don't have a stinger, do they? Do the manta ray have a stinger?
I don't think that they do.
Because
But,
I think they don't, yeah.
but the venom glands are on the underside, and and the stinger is covered with a little thin layer of skin. It's called the integumentary sheath. If in case you like your long words, that's what because they call it.
Integumentary sheath, huh? Okay,
Yeah.
we'll take
And of
it.
course, they have flattened bodies. Now, here's the challenge for evolutionists: is how these different features would have come about by evolution. Of course, there's various different species of these things, but they all are different, are pretty much the same design, so to speak, where you have the eyes on the top, but the underneath is the mouth. And so, and then the flattened bodies, they hide under the sand so that, and they use smell to find their prey. And the mouth has 2 shell-crushing plates. They don't have teeth.
Okay.
And so there's other species that have only sucking mouth parts. But what I found interesting is that the gills are right behind the eyes.
Yeah.
So the question is, how did these gills move to this particular spot on the, how did all these different things come from the pre-stingray?
Which whatever that is.
Whatever
What do
that was.
evolutionists say the pre-stingray was? Do they have a?
I don't think that they even,
Hazard
there
guess.
was, when I looked this up on the internet to find out if they actually had a evolutionary explanation for the origin of the stingray, I couldn't find anything to speak of. So,
Well, you know what the thing is, when I showed some people some real anomalies, like when we went out there and saw the Apatosaurus Indian petroglyphs and showed a couple, and well, it's a mystery. We'll explain it someday. That's usually what they do with these evolutionary missing links. Well, it's missing, but we'll find it someday. And generally speaking, any missing link they find always seems to create 2 or 3 extra ones.
and here's one. They have their favorite habitat is the coral reef. They bear their young alive. Okay, so
They
it's sort of
bear it like a mammal.
They bear them like a mammal,
Okay,
but it's without a placenta. And what happens is that there's sort of a yolk sac around the around
The baby or whatever they call them. What do they call
the
them?
embryos. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And they absorb the nutrients from the yolk sac when when that's depleted, the mother stingray provides uterine milk. So this is still inside the uterus, but it's born alive.
That's amazing.
So it's just a weird, different reproductive system. And so what's interesting about them is that they're not aggressive at all. And so they're not interested in attacking you unless you step on them.
Then they get mad.
But they're curious little creatures. And of course, my daughter and son-in-law have swum with them when in the wild, and they said they're really not like what you see in the video here. And that
What are they like?
Well, they don't. They're not as curious, or they're a little bit more afraid of you. But
Okay.
in this particular case, they're getting some food.
Yeah, I wonder how long it takes to train these things. Or do they raise them up from birth and they just get them used to people? I guess, to me, that's how all domestic animals have happened, probably.
Right.
You had a wild wolf, and they raised him up, and, even with Doug, they're finding out with foxes. I always wanted to have a pet fox. And I can't remember, it was a National Geographic article. The straighter the tail, the more domesticatable, or maybe it's curlier. It's one or the other. They can actually tell what's going to be more domesticatable of a fox. And so this makes sense on the stingray as well. That it's associated around us. And I mean, there are some animals, no matter what you do, they will never be domesticatable, but or even they'll always be afraid of you. But apparently these are not. So it's similar to the dolphin or the porpoise, you know.
Yeah.
They get used to human beings and they can do some stuff like that. But pretty cool stuff,
though. A
though.
little bit more about the stinger is that if you get stung by one, it causes a lot of pain and swelling and muscle cramps and infection, bacteria,
bad
fungus.
stuff is going to happen. Yeah,
and it's very painful, but it's not life-threatening.
Yeah, except for Steve Irwin.
Yeah. And the barb will often break off in the wound. It will require surgery.
That is what happened.
And so what, you know, it does have a barb in it, so it wants to go in rather than go out. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. But here's one thing about the feeding of the stingrays is that, you know, when we observed them, it cost $180 if you wanted to get in with the water and with the stingrays.
Yep.
Okay, I suppose that's to pay all the lawyers, you know.
Even down there, they probably have to deal with them.
But they'll press against the tourists in seeking food, you know, and they're very docile and curious. And the trained stingrays will allow you to hold them. And you know, they were feeding them squid. They were putting.
They like the squid, huh?
Yeah, they gave each of the people some squid, and for me, that's enough to gross me out.
Yeah, well, you know.
But here's one thing about, and I saw this in the Creation Matters about stingrays, is that they'll swim through the water with such ease that researchers from the University of Buffalo and Harvard University are studying how their movements can be used to design more agile and fuel-efficient underwater vehicles.
You know, Doug, how many things from plant and animals have we ripped off, and we have to engineer it thinking we can't usually do it as well.
Right.
Yet ours is designed, but the thing in nature is evolutionarily produced by random chance.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
Dr. Don DeYoung, of course, wrote this book, Discovery of Design, and you remember the presentation at the up north. He talked about things like you remember his demonstration of the birch leaf? And how it's folded up in a little pod, and that pops open just like that. And
one thing you always talk about, the filiary seed. We love that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we always love that one.
It's a Fibonacci spiral.
Yeah. In nature, you know.
In nature, yeah.
So what else we got? We got a three-toed sloth, right, Doug?
Yeah, we saw the sloth. You could see them in Panama and in Costa Rica.
I asked you this question earlier. I can't remember if are all sloths found in South America, or there's none? Are there any in Africa? Do you know? I don't know.
I don't think there's any in Africa. And I think
Australia.
I think they're all native of Central and
South
America. And there's one called the Maine sloth, or named for its cry.
It goes aye.
Aye, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And the Maine sloth is in Brazil. It's just on the coastline of the Amazon area.
Okay. Why do they call it Maine? It's got an actual mane on it?
Yeah, it's quite a bit different from the other three species. There's the brown-throated sloth, there's the pale-throated sloth, and the pygmy three-toed sloth.
And these are all fairly small in nature. They're not, say, maybe like the size of a cat or a dog or something like that? Or
what we saw was the three-toed sloth, and they said that it's not even closely related to the two-toed sloth. And so they said that it evolved independently.
Oh yeah, that's convergent evolution. They always say things like that when they have no explanation why you have. Well, maybe it's not convergent evolution, but it reminds me of it. But it's when you have totally different aspects in different animals, and they come up independently of each other. It's okay. To me, that's a real bait and switch argument. It's like okay, evolution is true. It's assumed to be true. Therefore, it must have had to have happened this way.
Right.
That's a just so story. Okay.
And so they're trying to understand how it could have descended from a common ancestor that would have invaded the Caribbean multiple times. And so they said, well, he invaded over here, but and then sometime later this other one came over.
Yeah.
But where did it come from? Because we don't know where it came from, because they don't find sloths anywhere else.
Anywhere else, yeah. And and migration. I have no issue that they probably did migrate there from someplace there, i.e. Noah's Ark.
Right.
I mean, at one point in time, they must have come off the ark, and since we believe that as a truthful story, all animals came off of there at one point.
Well, here's what I think, is that I think that the man may have brought them. Because we as creationists believe that there wasn't a primitive man. There was a man that lived for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yes.
After the flood for some time, and they were seafarers. They probably traveled all over the world, and probably many of the species that we see in South and North America came from immigration.
Doug, when you say that, it absolutely, it catches myself thinking you still buy into some of the naturalistic evolutionary arguments. It's not evolutionary, but it's more like they just came here on their own, and some of them probably did, but we very rarely, at least I don't, and I catch myself when you just said that.
Did the sloths come by the Bering Strait?
Yeah, the Bering Strait, the Bering Strait. Yeah, the Bering Strait. Yeah, but men could have brought them. I mean, we never think of that, but men were seafarers back in those days. You remember and there's the big theory about the diffusion theory about how man has been over in the New World for centuries before Christ. They were here. Phoenicians, we talk about things. It's pretty controversial still, but I think it's only controversial because it's not the accepted paradigm. Right. Because some of the stuff seemed pretty persuasive to me, such as Michigan signature copper and some of the old Phoenician bronze artifacts over in the old country. I go, that's a pretty persuasive argument to me. I wouldn't know Michigan signature copper. I'm trusting that the word they're telling me is a truthful one, because other people I've read it in other places as well. But
that's that book is in your museum about Michigan copper.
Yeah. So anyway, but so we saw the sloth as the size of a small dog or a large cat. We saw these are first of all, because I was talking earlier about the bigger sloths. Are they the two-toed sloths, or because the three-toed ones are all fairly small, like this small dog or a large cat?
I think that all sloths. Well, the ones I saw were probably this.
But they were three-toed ones, right?
Yeah, and they they're all arms and legs,
Yeah.
And you have 3 clawed toes on each limb, and all sloths have 3 toes. The difference is in the number of fingers.
So what do you mean, like in the front? The two-toed one has only 2.
I think you have 3 fingers rather than an opposable thumb or something like that.
Okay.
And when they're up in the tree, that's their environment. They just are happy to chew on leaves and lounge around. Yeah. But they're agile swimmers. If you find them in the water, they swim pretty good. And when they're on the ground, which they cannot walk on all 4 limbs, so they must use their arms and legs and claws to drag themselves across the rainforest floor.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you see penguins walking on the land, how stupid they look. Yeah. You get them in the water, boy, are they graceful. Or even birds. Birds are, when they're in the air, they're like wonderful. When they're on the ground, they're hopping around, and they don't look all that graceful for the most part.
Now we saw 3 sloths, and I got pictures of. I have one good picture, and a couple of.
Mediocre to poor ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they live up high on the canopy, so you have to focus your camera way up there. And of course, we were in the Tortuguero canals when we saw them.
Which country is that in?
This is Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, okay.
And the canals were actually dug during the logging days, and it's sort of like a canal that's parallel to the ocean.
Oh.
But it's the environment's very much like the Amazon. And there's crocodiles in the canals.
Oh, in the canal.
They told us, keep your hands inside the boat.
Yes. Whoa. Whoa. Crocs are dangerous. I mean, alligators can be dangerous too, but crocs. Now, are they freshwater or saltwater crocs?
These are, well, it's brackish water.
Yeah, probably got the worst of both worlds, yeah. Okay.
And the sloth will descend once a week to defecate on the forest floor.
I'm thinking, we were talking about this earlier, I go, why didn't you just take a crap from up at the top, let it float wherever it wants to? I mean, something, they come all the way down out of the canopy to take a dump on the forest floor and then go hiking back up. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah, I guess that because they're leaf eaters, they actually take on a lot of the color of the leaves. They're sort of greenish in the color and or gray,
camouflage,
green, yeah. And they're pretty long-lived. They live about 25 to 30 years, and they're solitary normally as an adult. And in Costa Rica, you'll find them in cacao or pastures or riparian forests, and you can have or in living fence. They have a lot of living fences in Costa Rica, where
they're made out of plants?
Plants, yeah.
Trees or bamboo, or not bamboo, but whatever it is, okay. Because you said riparian forest, he says grasses.
Yeah, it's basically a grassy, going through with a creek running through it, a little river. And mothers will guide their young about 5 to 7 months of age and then leave them. They don't have any incisor or canine teeth, and the teeth are all peg-shaped. And they really don't resemble the teeth of other mammals. And in this case, they have 9 cervical vertebrae. Now, all other mammals have 7.
So which came first? The other vertebrae or the sloth? Or the sloth come down? No, they're unique in themselves. That's another thing. Mm-hmm. Why does this one animal have it? It's almost like, well, I would say, the Lord does know the end from the beginning. He's probably said, I know you're going to come up with this theory. I'm going to do something in advance. It's gonna mess you up. All right, Doug. Now we're getting to one of my favorite ones too, the poison dart frog. It's a little dinky little thing.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of it's been used for a lot of things. But if you lick it, you can poison yourself because the skin is toxic, right?
That's right.
Yep.
And they're all brightly colored.
Very bright green.
And they're only they're little red ones. They're about
that's right. There's red ones too. Yeah.
And I got quite a few pictures of those guys, and they had a little terrarium that you could walk through, and they were right there. You could actually go out and touch them if you wanted to. But
that's not a good idea, I would think.
But many of these species are threatened, and of course we've all heard the story about the natives there using the poison from the frogs to put on their blow darts.
How do they do that? They rub it or something?
Yeah.
They rub it on the back? Okay.
And so, now here's the assumption proving the...
A priori assumption is proving facts.
Is that they say it's the bright coloration is there because it advertises unpalatability to predators.
Okay.
And so this is an anthropomorphic argument saying as if they on purpose did this so that they
I wouldn't have an issue if they said it was God who designed it that way.
Right, yeah.
But no, it's basically nature and properties, just random chance. It just worked because forces worked on it accidentally or randomly. They developed this mechanism to avoid capture, and then they advertise the fact that they're poisoned by being brightly colored. It's like they can think they make a thinking process in something they attribute non-thinking attributes to. In other words, it's random chance, properties inherent in matter, properties that are environmental things. We know those environments do work on genetic things, but it's like these are design elements, not I would say not just random things that just happen. But anyway, they like the humid tropical environments. Yeah. We know that,
Yeah, and it's a posomatic organism. It's thought to arise at least four times within the poison dart.
Now there you go. There's 4 different convergent evolutions. Is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, they're dramatically divergent. they take their eggs to the pools of water, and there's a lot of these tropical plants called bromeliads, and they're a favorite place for them to lay their eggs because there's a spot, it's sort of related to the pineapple, and there's a spot in the middle of it that...
Can you eat them?
I don't think you can eat bromeliads, but you can actually grow them. They're decorative plants.
Okay.
But they form a little pool in the middle of it.
Okay.
And the newly hatched tadpoles stick with the back of their parents, and they deposit them to the water.
Why do you think that they're in danger right now, Doug? Is it because are they people hunting them to death, or what just environments, or we're trashing the environments for them? Or
Yeah, I think it's habitat that's disappearing.
Okay. All right.
There's 170 different species of these creatures. Some of them interbreed, and some of them think that the poison comes from ants, centipedes, and mice they eat. And they find that the ones bred in captivity aren't as toxic.
So that probably sounds about right then.
And here's the disagreement that evolutionists have. They say the toxins preceded greater resource gathering. They preceded higher aerobic capacity. They evolved to allow them gather resources without predation.
Oh.
Coloration and toxicity are inversely related, and so in other words, some people think that the more toxic they are, the less color they have, and other ones think that the toxic ones are more colored.
Yeah, okay.
They don't know. And they were talking about mobility of the prey, and whether or not they're nocturnal, diurnal, or sexual selection by preference. They're trying to come up with different reasons why these things evolved. And so we're running out of time, Rich. But
the last one we were going to talk about was the hummingbird. Maybe we'll have to get to it another time, because that's almost a show in and of itself. Hummingbirds are very interesting and unique things. So you saw them down the different kind of breed of them. Did you see different? Because the one we have here is isn't it the throat?
Oh, there are all kinds of them flying around
down there. Yeah,
a lot of butterflies and a lot of these blue-backed.
The world is a wonderland of creation, and I just think this is amazing. But these are just a few of the animals that we find very difficult explanations at best. These evolutions come up with do not really serve very well at all.
Yeah, and one last creature we saw was a coatimundi who was running around the railroad tracks near the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
And it looks like a raccoon, but it's got a long nose, and I know somebody who had one as a pet.
Really?
And so it's kind of a fun little animal.
Yep.
Well, running out of time. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.